Big clubs have already started doing big things in the transfer market this summer. So joining us today to talk us through all of it is David Ornstein.
Hello.
And also joining us to explain if these moves make sense is JJ Bull.
Hello.
And John Mackenzie. Welcome to the Deal Sheet. David, let's start with Bryan Mbeumo, who's been a relatively big story this week. A lot of reports about his interest in Manchester United and vice versa. What can you tell me about what's happening there?
I think he was always going to be one of the big name potential movers in this transfer market because he has done so well. 20 goals in the Premier League last season, I believe. 25 years old, so great age. He only has 2 years left on his contract, but actually it's 1 year plus the option to extend by a further 12 months. And he has many admirers. What we reported the other day was that of those admirers, which include Arsenal, Newcastle United, Tottenham Hotspur, Manchester United, he has decided that he would like to join Manchester United. He's committed to them, subject to the clubs reaching an agreement. So it meant that Manchester United would have to start conversations with Brentford in an attempt to reach an agreement. Those conversations have now started. And we also reported that an opening offer was made by Manchester United to Brentford that we believe valued Mbeumo at around £45 million plus £10 million in add-ons. That is some way short of the level of figure that Brentford would expect if they're to consider his sale.
I love that language, some way short, because I feel like that could mean it's 5 million short or it's 100 million short, you know?
No, more accurate word, considerably short of where Brentford would expect it to end up if they're to part with the Cameroon international.
Okay.
And the conversations are going to continue as Manchester United try to strike a deal for somebody that Ruben Amorim is very determined to bring in as he rebuilds his Manchester United team, especially his attack, because they've already landed Matheus Cunha. If and when they do get Mbeumo, they would be looking to sell players afterwards to fund further transfer activity. But it appears they do have the money in place for these initial two deals, which was first seeming like it would be Liam Delap and Cunha. It's now pivoted to Cunha and Mbeumo. And let's see how they get on, because Brentford will drive a hard bargain. They've got no real need financially to sell. They would probably back themselves to do so next summer if it doesn't happen this time round, or to another club that is keen to bring him in. However, his desire is Old Trafford, and so that could hold major sway in this situation.
Okay. What do you think about this potential move, JJ? Do you like it? Does it make sense for Man United?
I really like it. I think he's great, and he's been great for a long time. We know where he fits in. He's going to come into here, but the problem you're going to have is that Ahmad has been quite decent for United the last little while. In fact, his numbers have been very good. But that's where Mbeumo would go if he joins in. He can play through the middle as well, but I think we know he's going to do like this. But the option you've got with Ahmad is that you can then play him at wing back, where he can then be a really attacking kind of player. They're quite different, and a lot of it comes into physicality. But as David was saying, the thing you've got with Mbeumo is that he scores lots of goals and produces lots of goals. So a couple of things I can show you. Here's one that shows where he runs.
He runs from there into there.
Yes.
Okay.
He likes to run straight at goal, and he makes things happen as he has done throughout his career. But United scored 44 goals in the Premier League last season. The only teams to score fewer were Everton and relegated. So you need to score more. And between Mbeumo and Cunha, you've got 35 goals. But actually, if you can include their assists, 48 goals. It's more than Man United. Now, there's a thing where you look at their overperformance. Maybe he's just had like a godlike season where he's not actually able to replicate that. Really good players can often consistently beat their expected goals. So when we look at Mbeumo's return at Brentford, you can see he was playing the Championship for a little bit, but it's pretty good. He's pretty close to where he is normally. He's had a bit of an overperformance this season, but he played really well this season. And Brentford last season really struggled, lots of injuries. So I think that's probably something to look at as well. But you also have this same sort of thing going on with Cunha, who is also having an extreme overperformance. So are they like amazing players that have just not made the step up to the big leagues? Or is it because they've just got lucky? You know, you can't really tell. But what we do know is that players always improve at Man United. And then next you've got Ahmad, who has also overperformed his expected goals. So you've already got a decent player in there who can do things. But what I think you'll find with Ahmad is that he lacks the physicality, especially of Mbeumo. So defensively, Mbeumo is really, really strong. He works very hard with it. Ahmad works hard too. But if you look through any clips of Ahmad playing, And when he's playing in this role here, where Mbeumo will be, I think oftentimes he goes for the press when you're not meant to be pressing because no one else is going with him. If you play him in this wing-back role, it will work against weaker opponents. So if you're playing in Europe, they're not, or you're playing in cup games, maybe you can do that as well. You're playing against a weaker team. But he doesn't quite have the defensive toolbox, I would say, mostly just being small and being able to do that. But Amorim's wing-backs are really important offensively going forward, and so we'll get lots of goals between the wing-backs, playing someone to the back post. There's lots of goals he scores where he'll be alongside the right forward when he's playing as a wing-back, where he ends up being the furthest forward. He scored a goal against, I think it was Aston Villa with his head, doing exactly this sort of run from here to here. So when you play with wing-back, you've got that option. I think what you'll find is that Mbeumo will start and probably Mazraoui will be the main wing-back, but when you're chasing a goal, which is something United have come up against quite a lot recently, you can then take Mazraoui off or Dalot off, and you've got someone who can give you more attacking impetus from the side, challenge Mbeumo for a starting place, you can rotate them, and it'll just make them stronger.
Anything else on Man United before we move on? Because I'm also aware that Jadon Sancho is returning, so unsure what's happening with him, or anything else you'd like to. Basically, the floor's yours, David.
Well, I wouldn't describe Sancho as returning necessarily. Right. He's not joining Chelsea. They couldn't reach an agreement with him on personal terms, and therefore they paid the penalty, £5 million, that nullified the loan with an obligation to buy from Manchester United. So the guarantee is he won't be playing for Chelsea next season. The expectation I have is that Manchester United will strike a deal with another club, and Sancho, I believe, is assessing his options now, whether it be in England or perhaps more likely overseas, to continue his career elsewhere. So that one is a topic that Manchester United need to address with urgency, because they see him as somebody who they can raise some cash for. And of course, shifting his salary off their wage bill, if they can, would have a massive impact on their PSR compliance. And it's essentially the reason why Chelsea haven't been able to sign him, because he was earning too much money at Manchester United for the Chelsea wage bill. Elsewhere at Manchester United, they will be looking to raise money for the departures of Marcus Rashford.
Does Aston Villa not qualifying for the Champions League change anything about the Marcus Rashford situation?
Potentially. They've got less money available and their PSR situation is quite tight. And so Aston Villa are going to have to very strongly consider selling players. And there's been such speculation over the likes of Emi Martinez and Morgan Rogers and Luca Digne, Ollie Watkins and so on. And so when they're having those thoughts after the devastating blow of missing Champions League and the riches that come with it, then of course it becomes more difficult to fund Marcus Rashford, but also perhaps to attract him to join a club that's not in the Champions League if he has options elsewhere that would present him with Champions League football. Beyond that, maybe Malacia, and I guess we've got to keep an eye on Rasmus Hojlund, because there is interest in him from the continent. It's been documented in various places that Inter Milan quite like him, and so perhaps that would provide Manchester United with an exit route for Hojlund. But then what would they do in the number 9 position? Do they recruit a specialist striker, or do they look to a more hybrid model with the likes of Cunha and Mbeumo? They've been linked with other players such as Antoine Semenyo and multiple other candidates, and wait until they find the right number 9. They've been linked with Kerkez, but it's not clear if they're at the top of his wish list, and whether they could fund it, and many more besides. There's a lot that needs to happen at Manchester United this summer, and I think they'll be one of the most interesting subjects on the transfer market.
Good job that they've started early then, yes. I suppose, isn't it? Okay, next up, let's discuss the Athletic's one to watch from the deal sheet this week. That, of course, is Florian Wirtz, who we hear is moving to Liverpool. Although, as we speak, David, there is no announcement about the completion of any such deal, is there? What can you tell me about it so far?
No, I'm immensely paranoid that everything we record will be superseded by the time this is broadcast and published. But Liverpool are in ongoing negotiations with Bayer Leverkusen to sign Florian Wirtz. He wants to join Liverpool, which is the key thing here, and it's how we were able to advance the story a couple of weeks ago, because of the options at his disposal. Bayern Munich were there, Manchester City were there, but it seems he communicated very clearly to those suitors that Anfield was his destination of choice, and Liverpool were prepared to push for him. So the key factors aligned. However, no agreement so far with the club that owns him. We did reveal that Liverpool had made a club record offer worth up to 130 million euros, but that appears to be short of what Leverkusen are looking for. And so the negotiations continue. Most recently, at the time of recording, I've heard that it's really on to add-ons, bonuses, and how they would be achieved. So that is extremely advanced, but they're not yet at the finish line. Do I expect Florian Wirtz to sign for Liverpool? Yes, I do. I think there's a very good chance of it. Of course, they've done their due diligence on alternative options in case it doesn't come to fruition. And that's why we revealed in the deal sheet that Arne Slot had left his holiday and flown to the south of France to meet with Rayan Cherki and hold conversations with him. But I just want to caveat that that meeting was scheduled before the Wirtz situation accelerated, and Liverpool decided to honour that meeting, which is prudent and wise and pretty normal. While you are looking at all eventualities, you gain more market knowledge, you gain an understanding of the player and crucially the costs involved if you are going to look to do that. But Wirtz has always been their prime and number one target, and it has moved forward. And it looks like Cherki will be going to Manchester City, which I'm sure we'll come on to talk about. And so Liverpool is full steam ahead on what would be a club record transfer, and depending on where the price ends up, a Premier League record, very possibly.
Okay, John, how would Wirtz fit in at Liverpool, do you think? Quite exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a big question everyone's asking, where's he going to play? But I actually think that it's potentially the wrong question to ask, because what you need to think about is, like, what is it that Florian Wirtz is as a player? And for me, his big attribute is that he's a high volume final third player. What I mean by that is he just takes a lot of touches in the final third, and often all over the place in the final third, and is able to facilitate his teammates. So I've got a viz here which just shows you the players this season with the most final third touches, and this is for anyone with more than 15 games under their belt, basically. So Kvaratskhelia doesn't quite fit in. He would be on this list otherwise. When we say touches, it's also worth caveating by saying that's not every time a player touches the ball. So if you have a dribble with 5 touches, that doesn't count as 5 touches, just counts as 1 touch. So touches really just means actions that they have. So what we can see here is...
You know what, they should call it actions.
Yeah, I mean, they should. However, here we are. But so Florian Wirtz, then we have him third highest per 90 touches. So he's having a lot of actions in the final third. I think there's a few things to point out here. So there's other players like him, so guys who are facilitators for their team. So Michael Olise right at the top of the list, Kevin De Bruyne at Manchester City. It shows why they might have been interested in someone like Florian Wirtz as an option. But we also have players like Jeremy Doku and Lamine Yamal. These are guys who are operating in wide areas, so the teams will often funnel the ball through them.
There's more space.
There's more space, but Lamine Yamal, he's obviously an insanely creative player, so you want to get the ball to him a lot, right? So a lot of the players on this list are guys who are going to do things with the ball, so you want to get the ball to them. So he is in that list. The other thing that's worth noting about this list, I think, is that there's lots of teams that are repeated on this list. So we've got a few Bayern options, a few Paris Saint-Germain options, a few City options. That makes a huge amount of sense, right? Because those teams are going to be in the final third quite a lot. They've got those creative players to use. Whereas we've got Florian Wirtz, who's at Leverkusen, the only option for them on that list as well. So not only is he like towards the top of a list amongst all of the other players, he's doing it at a team where they aren't quite so dominant as some of these other elite teams as well.
Well, there's no Liverpool on that list either.
There's no Liverpool on that list, which is interesting. But I've got one sequence of play just to show you what I mean by saying he's a facilitator for his teammates. So this is Leverkusen versus Liverpool, so against a Premier League standard side, the team that he may well be playing for. All I want you to see from this is just how often he just finds space, then finds passes, moves from space to space. He's just constantly creating options for his teammates. So Leverkusen are playing from left to right here. Here he is already in space. The Tapsoba has the option of a pass into his feet. That pass is made, and immediately he just feeds the ball through to Granit Xhaka into the wide area. Granit Xhaka then is in behind. He can play the ball across. So already just one touch, bang, feeding one of his teammates through in behind to generate something. Actually, this ball bounces off a defender, comes out wide. You can see the ball just coming out of play here. And already Wirtz is moving to receive the ball. So he's looking for the space, finding the space and generating it. He receives the throw in from Granit Xhaka, plays the pass back to him, immediately moving into space again. You can see him constantly trying to find those pockets of space and helping his teammates out. So
this is a lot like how I play football, John.
This is a lot like how you play FIFA, to be fair, I would say.
It's true.
An immediate bounce pass into his feet, and then he can just drop the ball back into another player in the central area. So constantly just recycling the ball, making things happen. And again, as soon as he plays that pass, he finds the space. So now you've got a nice situation where essentially Leverkusen have pulled the Liverpool structure around, but they've got a really nice structure themselves. Wirtz is in here, he can access a lot of players from that. Now here, I think it's Luis Diaz actually tries to track him, and as a result, Wirtz then peels off the back when the ball is played forward, again, finding space, looking for the ball, gets into this situation, plays a lovely little dink pass into Jeremy Frimpong, who again is then behind. So this is a 20-second sequence. We've seen numerous actions. He's received the ball a number of times, played a few passes, carried the ball a bit, played the ball through. This is the sort of player that we're talking about. It's a guy who makes things happen, and all you need to do then when thinking about his position is think, well, how do we get him into these areas where he can influence the game? This is what he'll be doing. He'll be playing in central areas. He can drift out either side. You can basically play him anywhere, and that's essentially what's happened through his career. This is all his positions that he's played for Leverkusen since he's arrived in 23-24. But we can even see from the heat map that he's operating just in that sort of space that we've been showing him operating in on both sides. Has more of a left side bias, which I think is quite good for Liverpool, as we'll go on to see. But when it comes to his influence, this is his assists and goals for Leverkusen last season. You can see that he's operating on both sides of the pitch. And if we have a look at actually Liverpool's assists from this season, where they're generating chances from, you can see there's a massive right side bias. So bringing in someone like Florian Wirtz, who does have a bit more of a left side bias, might help them address that. So the big question becomes, how do you then fit him into the team? I think that then becomes more of a question about where are you going to have him out of possession rather than in possession, because in possession, as we've said, Wirtz is just going to float. He's going to move around, he'll drift out either side, he'll be a facilitator. I think there's two options. I think you can play him on the left-hand side. So let's assume that Gakpo and Diaz aren't playing. You can play him here, he will drift inside. You're hoping to bring in someone like Milos Kerkez, who is going to operate in those wide areas anyway, so that sort of gives you the ability to have Wirtz drifting and not lose that wing. And then out of possession, Liverpool playing this 4-2-4 shape, you'll have Wirtz on the outside of that front four. That works perfectly well. But I'd say another option that they could use is actually just using Wirtz as a 9, if they don't manage to bring in a 9 in the market, which could be a possibility. And then you can have someone like Diaz or Gakpo out here. Then essentially what you would have is him dropping in deeper with these two, Diaz and Salah, running in on the diagonals. We know that Salah is obviously an incredible creator and goal scorer. So if you have Wirtz slightly deeper, you can then find him on the overlap here as well. But what this gives you is the ability to keep Szoboszlai. So some people might suggest, why not play him as a 10? Szoboszlai, I think, is super important for them out of possession. So you want to try and keep this midfield as solid as possible. This way, using him as almost a false 9 allows you to then have a 4-man midfield, protect the centre a little bit more, but you've still got goal scorers in the wide areas who can make those out to in runs. So
this is kind of terrifying, isn't it? Like, if you were playing against this team, this is scary.
Yeah, I think Wirtz is a genius. He's an incredible. I mean, basically what we've talked about him doing there is, space interpretation, as the Germans like to call it. There's this concept of the Raumdeuter, right? But I think what you get that with Wirtz. He's always finding space. He's always finding teammates. He's always taking situations that aren't dangerous and making them more dangerous than you thought they could be. But he even has this ability, I think, when he's on the ball. I've not even mentioned his dribbling, but he has this ability on the ball to recognise the immediate space around him so that he can move the ball into that space where the defenders can't catch him. So he doesn't ever really look like a super physical player, but because he understands space so well, he's constantly just moving the ball. He's got that quality that Messi had. When Messi used to just move the ball and it felt like, the defender couldn't get that because he just put it in the perfect spot for it to go between two players, and actually he has that as well. So add those two things together and you've got a really dangerous player, and it's I think we're going to be pretty lucky to have him in the Premier League next season if he does end up coming.
Well, fingers crossed the deal gets completed. David, before we move on from Liverpool, there are question marks over some of the other players on the pitch here, and there's a couple of others that we want to mention as well, because there's been some talk about Kerkez, that we know that there was a bid rejected for Luis Diaz. What else can you tell us about Liverpool so far this summer?
Well, shortly before recording this, I reported on The Athletic that Liverpool have rebuffed an approach from Barcelona for Luis Diaz. they called on Wednesday, I think it was Deco, the sporting director of Barca, to discuss a possible transfer, to which Liverpool held up a not for sale sign. They are planning with him for next season, despite the fact that there's only 2 years left on his contract and he's not had a new deal since joining in January 2022, despite the fact that they won't be renewing him by the looks of it. And normally at that 2 year to go period, you either renew or sell, especially these big clubs who are so switched on. But I think they see at the age of 28 and the quality that he's providing that it might actually be better when you analyse what you could get to replace him with on the market to keep him and use him for the next 2 years and maximise his footballing value, unless, of course, an offer comes that allows them, provides them with the resources to go out and find somebody that's as good as or superior to him. And yeah, therefore Barcelona were given their marching orders, and it sends out a message to the market as well. We've not seen any indication so far that Luis Diaz wants to go. If that was to change, or Liverpool's stance on a transfer was to change, then we could have a situation there. But that's the situation right now. Kerkez is at the top of Liverpool's list for a new left-back, and they are said to be edging towards getting this done. I think they're in a really good place with the player and his representatives because he wants to join Liverpool. I think his father, who's very influential in his career, is set on his son joining Liverpool, and those talks have been quite extensive. I'm not aware of the club-to-club talks being quite as extensive, and certainly I don't have information to suggest they're where reports have suggested they are. However, it can happen very quickly because the asking price is pretty clear from Bournemouth, £40-45 million. And if Liverpool are ready to go there, it will get done. If not, then they might have to explore other options. But I think Liverpool feel it's in a good place. I would be intrigued to see if Darwin Núñez, who is not on your graphic, is sold, whether a new centre-forward comes in, a number 9. They do like Alexander Isak, who doesn't, but it's not looking like being a realistic transfer because Newcastle are determined to keep hold of him and have qualified for the Champions League and can probably offer him everything he needs at this moment. They've got admiration for players such as Hugo Ekitike of Eintracht Frankfurt. It would come at a pretty penny. They're not the only team who like him. Chelsea, for example, too. Or do they go in the way that the guys have shown with a sort of false 9 in a Wirtz or use other players? So there's a lot going on at Liverpool. I think we could see some departures, maybe a Harvey Elliott, who played very little last season and is liked by many clubs. A Jarell Quansah, who Liverpool, again, are not actively looking to sell, but he's a young player who will want regular game time, and there are clubs who are prepared to give him that. We've seen Kelleher move to Brentford, and it presumably opens the way for Mamardashvili to come in and vie with Alisson for the number 1 shirt. So really, I don't remember such a busy time in the transfer market for Liverpool. It's reminiscent of a team that has not just won the Premier League title and needs to be transformed. But I guess Liverpool will view it as adapt or die, and you've got to always evolve. And also, they haven't done extensive recruitment in the last year or so. They kept their powder dry. And so that puts them in a strong financial position to attack the market. They're doing so early. Richard Hughes as sporting director and Michael Edwards as CEO of football for Fenway Sports Group really are conscious of the fact that if they don't maintain the sort of levels that they've shown in the last season or even improve upon them, then others will close the gap, and that's not what they want.
Well, next up, we're going to go to the What We're Hearing quickfire round, where I have the pleasure of just barking football teams at David Ornstein and getting him to answer within 1 minute what he knows about those teams. Guess which the challenging bit there is. Okay, here we go. Are you ready? First off, this one's going to be hard within a minute. Arsenal.
Arsenal are focusing on a new number 9, whether it's going to be, say, a Benjamin Sesko or Victor Gyökeres. They also want a top quality wide player. I think ideally on the left side, you've seen names like Rodrigo, Anthony Gordon and various others, Nico Williams we've talked about before. They would also like some backup for Bukayo Saka on the right. That's why they targeted Bryan Mbeumo. In midfield, they need to renew Thomas Partey or let him go. And if he goes, then they're going to have to replace him. Left back, a couple of departures. Kieran Tierney's already gone. Zinchenko's available for exit too, but they've got players there at the moment. They would like a centre half. They were also in for Hojlund, but didn't manage to get him, so watch this space on that position. And they need a number 2 goalkeeper as well, because Neto returns to Bournemouth, so they will be scouring the market for one of those.
What a professional, good lord.
Did that take the minute that was required for all of the different clubs as well?
I think it was almost exactly 60 seconds. And Manchester City, who've already done some work this summer.
They were quickly out the blocks this year by recruiting in January, almost to get the rebuild started and prepare for this summer. It now emerges, despite spending quite exorbitantly in that winter market, that those are not necessarily all first team starters. Some of them are just to sort of build out the squad to be competitive again going forward. Now I think we're onto the phase of real first team starters. And that's why we see them agreeing a deal with AC Milan to sign the Dutch international midfielder Tijani Reinders. 55 million euros plus add-ons, a 5-year contract. He'll still need to undergo his medical and complete that move. But everybody I speak to who knows him far better than me says that it was time for him to go from AC Milan, despite signing a new contract not long ago, because he's a Champions League level player and they're not in the Champions League, and they could do with the finances. That looks a shrewd addition. Then they turn their focus, in no particular order, to Ryan Cherki, because Manchester City have been waiting to sign a recognised left-back for a hell of a long time, and he is the one they are going for. Agreements still need to be reached with Wolverhampton Wanderers and with the player himself. But all parties are optimistic that in the coming days that is going to be wrapped up, and possibly before the Club World Cup. And then maybe the jewel in the crown is on course to be Rayan Cherki. He is a player that every big club has been monitoring for such a long time. Liverpool in particular heavily linked with him, and we talked about Arne Slot's visit to see him. But the direction of travel is Manchester City. Again, agreements with the player and in particular Lyon need to be struck. And there was this suggestion, some reports that there was a 22.5 million euros release clause. I'm told that's not the case. I don't even know how possible it is in French football. But irrespective, Lyon would want, I don't know, around double that. Certainly it's going to be a negotiation. And then you have to get the salary right and the commissions around it all. So it may take a little bit of time. But again, optimism that a conclusion is in sight and that he will be coming into the club to fill that void left by Kevin De Bruyne, and what a crucial signing that will be. So 3 recruits potentially in the short term, and perhaps more to follow as the market goes on, but also departures as well. I think we expect Jack Grealish to go. Maybe it will have to be on loan. And uncertainty over a number of players, Kyle Walker, Edison, John Stones, and so on. It's a really fascinating time at City as they look to try to restore their place at the top table of domestic and European football.
Cherki's a really interesting one because he has been talked about as like a superstar wonder kid for a long time, but no one's quite taken a punt yet. So it's hard to work out why. Or is it? I can show you in a second. His numbers are great. According to this graphic, he has the best creative numbers in Europe, which obviously sounds very good. Does it from a variety of places. But this might be one of the reasons as to why he hasn't gone anywhere. This is a comment on Cherki, why he was withdrawn against PSG in a match. He was beginning to make efforts only in one direction, and it became dangerous for the team. So it might be to do with the ever-important out-of-possession stuff that you need to be able to do, and of course that Pep Guardiola would demand. So Guardiola's influence as a coach will be really important and interesting to watch, because Cherki is one of those superstar players who sometimes just lets things go by him rather than being part of it. But it looks like with the profile of fullbacks bringing, especially like Aït-Nouri, I love Aït-Nouri, that could make the way they play completely different.
Yeah, and I think if we look at those three players in conjunction, it sort of indicates the way that maybe Pep Guardiola sees Man City going. Because on the board here, we've got Man City in a sort of rough 4-3-3 that we've seen them playing in for many seasons now under Guardiola. But actually what we saw at the end of last season was Guardiola developing a new approach to solve some of the problems that they'd been having throughout the season. Actually ended up looking much more like a 4-2-2-2, which is hard to say. But I think these signings, I think, indicate that maybe this is going to become much more of a familiar sight with Manchester City in the Premier League. So let's put Reinders in. Reinders is fantastic. He's an all phases player, so you can have him dropping in, receiving from the goalkeeper. He's a good ball progressor, ball carrier, and then he can box crash as well. So he's like the perfect Gundogan replacement. Seems as though you could then play him alongside Rodri and then have, rather than these two width holding forwards, you want to aim probably for slightly narrower forwards who can play. We should have Marmoush on here actually, but you can have these two. You have these two 10s and then two forwards like this. So it's a much narrower central presence that opens up the space then for your fullbacks. So let's say that Guardiola's moved back inside, which is where he played towards the end of the season. You bring someone like Rayan Cherki in, and now he has the ability to move up and down this channel. He's the one who's providing the width. Although it's worth saying that Cherki is a really flexible profile. He could invert as well if they want. So I'm sure we'll see City moving between this shape and the shape that they used in the past. And then it's a case of, well, could we then use Rayan Cherki potentially as one of these narrower 10s? We'll probably have Foden on the other side like this. And then you've probably got Marmoush here. But the question then is, where do you fit him out of possession? If City start playing this 4-2-4 shape, do you really want him in the wide areas? Those wide roles are actually quite important for different pressing structures. So it could be the case that Cherki is used inside and then Marmoush is used outside. So
he's played there for Lyon a little bit as
well.
But
on the subject of Cherki out of possession, I think there's this sort of rumour that he has poor work rate, but I think a lot of it just comes down to physicality. I think like with his physicality, he has like really good acceleration, but maybe not like sustained good top speeds, which means he's a great dribbler. He gets through pressures, but if someone's chasing him, they can catch him. So he's very much a short burst kind of player. Out of possession, that can have impact. So the question is how they're going to fit him into that front line so that they're not losing too much.
It's a bit similar to Ahmad almost.
Sounds it, doesn't it?
Yes.
I'm sympathetic to it because I think if someone was chasing me, they'd catch me as well.
I think
so. But David Ornstein, thank you so much for joining us today. We know you'll be back with us throughout the summer transfer window to bring us more delicious transfer news.
I will. Did you just catch me looking at transfer news on my phone?
I did, yeah. I was trying to show that the audience, David's already back at work, as we should be. John, JJ, let's mush.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Amy Lawrence and James Horncastle. With the latest transfer news and insights on every Premier League story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football, and you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.